Hey, this is Michael Lindsay, and we're going to talk about the 2020 Yamaha YZ450F and YZ250F. Yamaha just dropped all their press info for this bike, so we're going to go through it. We're going to dissect kind of some of the terminology and see what has changed on the bikes, and maybe try to break it down and see if we can make a little more understanding of what some of these changes might be doing. So first up, the YZ450, it is year 3 of what will likely be 4 years for this generation run. This type of generation bike was introduced in 2018. There was some small updates in 19, and being that 2020 is like a mid-generation for them, year 3 of 4. Yamaha, the last couple generations with their 450s, has taken that year 3 of 4 bike as an opportunity to introduce a decent host of changes. It's still technically that generation bike. It keeps that design structure, but there's usually a big frame update and a big motor update with it, and that's what we're seeing out of the 450. Starting with the frame, it may still look similar just from a quick glance, but they have changed quite a few items on the frame. It's not exactly listed in this PR info. We'll learn about that when we do the press ride intro on it, and I think that's about 6 or 7 weeks from now. But more than likely, they have changed certain thicknesses, certain dimensions within that frame to change the flex characteristics. They're listing the reason for changing this is to improve cornering performance along with traction and bump reaction. So the Yamaha is already really well known, specifically the YZ450 bump absorption comfort through the frame. It is top of the class or battling for top of class in that feature, how much absorption and comfort the chassis creates. Like I said, we hear some bikes we talk about being a little bit rigid. The Yamaha is definitely not in that regard. There's really good comfort in that chassis. So you can see they're definitely, if I had to guess, they're trying to maintain that, if not better in certain situations, while at the same time trying to get more of a planted feel, more of a maybe quicker reaction per se, or just a little bit more response from the chassis in certain cornering situations, since that's usually where most people point at the Yamaha as what they feel like a lack, some of its cornering ability. So they're always, since they've gone to this rearward facing cylinder engine, they've always been just really working on the chassis, and every year making better and better leaps towards how the bike handles overall and getting something that is suiting a wider range of riders than they had when they originally introduced this style of bike back in 2010. Some of the other updates to the bike are speaking of the chassis, is the top trip clamp, the front axle, and the engine mounts. There is a new cylinder head, which we'll get into in a second. That's why the top engine mounts have changed. Top trip clamp has changed, and the front axle. They made some changes just with wheel spacers and the mounting surfaces last year, and that made a big difference. A couple brands have jumped around their axle sizes before. That makes a really big difference on front end feel. So it doesn't list what the front axle dimension change is. Once again, we'll probably learn that when we get to that intro. The suspension itself has also been updated. And speaking of engine mounts, why brands go that far, it's actually interesting as I just launched a company with a friend, a design engineer who works for one of the big OEM suspension companies and works with the race team. If you want, you can find the link below. It's called Works Chassis Lab. We actually do all the engine mounts that Star Racing Yamaha uses, that Factory Kawasaki uses, like Eli Tomac runs, MCR Honda, Rock River Yamaha, Adamant and App on Suzuki Bowers. I could go list. You can find it below. Not going to go too far into that and too much promotion, but engine mounts make a big deal depending upon material, thickness, how the cutouts are, flex, like how it transfers energy from the engine to the chassis or certain points of the chassis across itself can make a really big difference on how the bike handles. So little things like that, Yamaha's listing can actually make a big change. Like I said, we have some suspension updates, just like I said, some enhanced compression and rebound characteristics, so just a tweak in the setting. Last year, Yamaha came in, was here last year or the year before, they finally updated the KYB SSS fork. They went to a little bit bigger cartridge size, went from a 24 to 25 millimeter damping rod piston. So a small update for that suspension. They're still just tweaking on the settings to match some of the chassis changes they have made. Another big one is they've redesigned the front brake caliper. Yamaha's used the same front brake caliper forever, and it's probably rated as one of the per se worst in the class just for overall feel. Even though it has a 270 millimeter rotor, it's just not as usable. It doesn't list exactly what they've done. I'd like to see them. I'm hoping they went to the style of Nissan front caliper maybe that Honda is using now, which has 2 different size pistons like the Works Nissan units are. Typically the leading edge piston is going to be smaller, where the brake rotor is first, even though the brake rotor is constantly in the pads, where you would think of the energy entering the brake caliper, you run a smaller piston there and a little bit bigger one at the bottom. I believe the top would be 27 millimeter, 30 for the bot will actually be reversed because of the way the front wheel is rotating. The entry point is 27 millimeters, the exit point is 30, and that keeps more even brake pad pressure on the rotor. So hopefully that's what they're going to. That would actually help quite a bit on this bike, but there is an update to the front brake caliper, the pads, and the front and rear disc. Talking about the engine, now this one I actually got wrong quoting this actually on the Pulp Show last night. I thought based off the casting design of the cylinder head, and there was some pictures of the bike from Japan, a couple of us me guys thought that it was going to be a finger follower head because it looked a lot like the design that the Cowie has gone to on the head casting, and based on, you know, how aggressive cam profiles are trying to get, I thought that's where they would have gone to. It still is a standard bucket based system basically for the control of the valve, which I was pretty surprised at. But the cylinder head has changed its overall casting. They have done what they can to, per se, cut weight out of the cylinder head, to shrink it, to bring the valve angles up steeper, but while still maintaining it with a bucket, which I was pretty surprised about. But they do list that they have redone the combustion chamber size. They've gone to steeper valve angles and a more aggressive cam profile. So looks like they're trying to spread, once again, out that power a little bit more. They've also jumped up the compression ratio, I believe, from 12.8 to 1 on the 19. The 2020 is up to a 13 to 1 compression ratio. And then the other thing that's changed in that piston is we have a longer connecting rod. That doesn't mean the stroke per se is longer. They just have a longer rod, so they've moved the piston pin higher up into this piston, which changes the leverage on the piston coming from the crank. It changes, I believe, the dwell time during combustion point maybe a little bit. I believe that gets changed because of that. So definitely some upgrades there. Transmission has been refined for smoother shifting, so they've done some upgrades to their transmission. The other thing added to the 450 this year is a launch control system. Everybody's been moving to more of we got launch maps a couple years ago, but there were these really smooth, like more like concrete start style maps. More and more the OEMs have been moving to a launch control system that is more like what they use with their, some of the guys use on race teams, some don't like to use them, but a type of map where it has an RPM set limiter. It has a certain power restriction that comes on stages. So basically on the line, you just hold the clutch in, you hold the throttle wide open, it hits a certain RPM limiter, it holds it at, and it allows you to do a more aggressive launch. It doesn't list that that's why, but that's their listing as an update for having the launch control system, so it's likely what it's going to be. They also have, of course, the tuner app that they've really popularized the last 2 years, phone app to be able to tune the maps and a lot of things on the bike. They've also added a dual mode engine switch onto the bike, which the 250 had last year, and I believe the Off-Road FX had for the 450. So now you can upload 2 different maps off your phone onto that, and you can switch on the fly. I like theirs because you don't even have to slow down, roll into neutral, or anything. You can, over a jump, anywhere on the track, you can press the button, and it'll switch maps instantaneously, which is really cool. Another big change this year is the secondary color. Yamaha has always jumped back and forth. You know, we've had the occasional yellow, a lot of different types of blues or whites and teals. I mean, this year it's just a straight up gray. A couple aftermarket plastic companies have made, I think they call it like a Nardo gray, pretty popular last year, and it looks like Yamaha's decided to take that on. It is listed to be in dealerships next month. So as we enter into July, the press part I'm looking at shows the MSRP at $9,299, which would be the same as the 19, but Yamaha's website has it updated to $9,399, so a $100 increase over last year's model, and I would say likely the increased price is more accurate of the two. So last thing up for the YZ450 that's notable is a tire change from the Dunlop MX3S, the outgoing generation tire, to the new MX33, maintaining the same sizes, 80/121, 120, 80, 19 rear. I'm going to drop in the spec list here for the 450 at the end. You guys can check that out. As we move into now talking about the YZ250F. There is going to be really short narration for this bike because it is a straight up BNG. It maintains the same price as last year at $8,199 MSRP. The 2019, of course, was a massive overhaul for that bike. They did a great job of taking an engine that was basically known as a low to mid powerhouse and really giving it the top end legs to compete with the KTM, the Husqvarna, giving it the most rounded engine in the class. Fantastic chassis, fantastic suspension, dominated 250F shootouts left and right. It's done really well for the Star team this year. So it's just listed as a BNG change, no setting updates, nothing. It's basically the only real big change is the colors for the blue and then having the gray option this year. The one thing I was surprised and not surprised to see is there was a few small durability issues per se with the 2019 model, similar to like when Yamaha came out with the 2014 update. They had some problems that they cleaned up after the first year. There is some transmission issues that was known on the 19. A couple of little things have popped up here and there, wiring related. These type of press release infos, really short ones like this, they usually don't go through durability parts changes. They usually list and note out performance changes of the bike. And since we don't have anything performance related, it's just listed as BNG. I'm sure when we go to ride this bike, which I believe will be sometime this month or in dealerships this month, we may get to learn a little bit more about that, because that's usually the type of event we'll go to, and they'll start telling us like, okay, so durability or this part number has been updated, this part number has been updated. So we'll learn more when we get to the bike intro. I'll do a walkthrough kind of when we get to that to note anything for that. But other than that, it is, like I said, BNG bike for them, no notable updates. So that about covers it for the Yamaha. If you have any further questions about anything in this press release, maybe something I didn't explain well enough, something you want more insight on, drop in the comments section below. I will answer it. If you like all the content here, we're about getting into bike testing season, this will get a lot more exciting. Based on my previous me job, I'm invited to all these bike intros. We're doing shootouts, all that good stuff. So if you like all this stuff, please hit subscribe. I'll have plenty more good content. I'd also, lastly, before this video ends, I'd like to thank Chaparral Motorsports. They're a huge supporter of everything I do on this channel. If you're looking to get new bikes, side-by-side, quad, etc., my email is in the description below. Hit me up. I'll put you in touch with the sales manager. They've been cutting really good deals for a lot of my friends and people I've been leading their way lately. And then if you're just looking for parts, accessory, gear, etc., they have a huge online website, chatmoto.com. You throw in the code ML512 at checkout to save yourself a few dollars. Thanks for watching.